Okay, so we've discussed the first two parts of mise en scène, costume and setting and decor, and now I want to move on to lighting. Now, typically what we use in what's called Hollywood classical films is three-point lighting. This is the lighting that makes you look beautiful. And if you start using this kind of lighting in your own photographs, you will notice that they immediately look a lot better. You can oftentimes get a friend to hold up a phone next to you to help simulate the fill light. But let me explain what this is first. So three-point lighting involves first a key light. Now, the key light is usually the brightest light in a scene, usually, in order to do three-point lighting well. And it is to the left or right of the subject. You see the subject here. In this particular instance, it's to the right of the subject. But it can also be the left. But it's off-center. You see the camera is right here. And it's usually higher than the object that you're shooting. Now, over here is the fill light. Now, the fill light is normally a light that is slightly less intense than the key light. What the fill light does is it eliminates shadows and it makes you look a lot prettier. So the key light is the brightest. It's what it seems to be the main source of lighting. And then the fill light is what kind of destroys the shadows. The backlight here, what the backlight does is that it separates the subject, in this case an actor or a person, from the background. If there's not a backlight behind the object that you're shooting, then you'll see that the background tends to look like it's crushing or is very close to the person or the object that you're shooting. Okay, so I'm going to show you some examples of this. Here we have lighting where primarily you can see we only have key lighting, and you can tell this because here on Tink's face you can see the source of light is very intense right here. It's obviously coming from over here up to the top, over to her right, but in front of her. And we have strong shadows down here. If they were about beneath her face, if there was a fill light that was coming from over this direction to her left, then those shadows would be eliminated. You can also tell that there's not a backlight because it looks like the background is kind of like looming over her and maybe just going to crush her. So here we have Tink with an example of what I would say would be definitely key lighting plus fill. So you can tell that the primary source of light is coming here from her left, but that since there are not really dark, fierce shadows here, that there's also a fill light. Again, I'm not seeing much evidence of backlighting. You can tell because there's shadows here behind the mask statue that she has. And also it seems like the background is very close to her. Because even though we know logically that that wall is probably somewhere between 4 and 6 feet from her, it looks much closer. And this is due to lighting concerns. So again, just look at Tink's face here with very minimal lighting. See how beautiful she looks. And then go back here and see how much more ominous she looks without having the fill lighting, without having the backlighting. All right. So here's an example of where we have a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. And you can literally tell that there are backlights here because there are lights behind Kodak's head. And again, we can see that the primary source of light is coming here from Kodak's right, but that there's also a fill light coming from the left because there are very minimal shadows underneath her. And her skin looks to be rather beautiful. More beautiful than if she did not have this lighting. And we're going to see an example of that here in a minute. But you can also tell, again, that because of this lighting behind Kodak's, the background wall looks like it's much farther away from Kodak's than in the earlier scenes, when probably the rooms were the same size. So lighting can affect the way that, or does, it's not that it can, it does affect the way that your images appear when you take photographs or when you shoot video. And so it's really important, depending on what your intent is, to think very strategically about, do I need, in addition to a key light, a fill light? Do I want a backlight? Do I want it to make like, do I want it to look like the background is pressing up against my characters, or do I want it to seem like it's a large airy room? Sometimes you'll see scenes where the director or cinematographer, sorry, only uses a backlight, and that will create like a halo effect around the actor or the object, and then put their face into dark shadow. So depending on what your purpose is, or what the director's purpose is, the cinematographer's purpose, they will make different choices. But 3-key lighting is the thing that will make you or your subject look beautiful if you use it wisely. Now, here I want to draw attention again to how the annotations can help us to do research and to think about the decisions that the directors, the producers, the cinematographers are making as they work on the film. Here you can see that they noted, normally you'd put silk or use flags on the window to damp down the glare, but we didn't have anything. Financial concerns and resources will definitely impact how a scene is shot and the quality of that scene, and then in turn affect how the audience perceives that scene. So you can see that here the light, the natural light that's coming from the windows, is blowing out this portion of the image, and also is throwing this portion of Felicia Day or Kodak's face into shadow because of the extreme light that's coming from behind her. The fill light is having a hard time competing. The fill and the key lights are having a hard time competing with that bright sunlight that's coming from the back of Felicia. And I also want to draw attention to acting here. Her acting, you can tell by the way that she's holding her hands, by the position of her mouth, the way she's holding her mouth, the way that she's squinting her eyes, the way that she's hunching her shoulders. Then in this particular scene, she's supposed to appear to be upset. And we are going to be paying attention to details like that as we go forward. How the human body is used by actors to communicate plot points, to communicate the narrative, to communicate what it is that the character is supposed to be feeling at that time. So there are many things, or many parts of mise en scène that are working together simultaneously. Here again we have Kodak's living room / dining room. It shows that she doesn't have a lot of money, because most people who have a lot of money don't have their living room and their dining room in the same space, but that she's working to make it to be tranquil. She's got the red, pink, purple painting up here that goes nicely with the, what is that? I think that's lavender, which is an herb. The chairs that are used also in her bedroom. You see that there are 3 chairs here. The 4th chair is in her bedroom. So again, shows that she doesn't have a lot of money, but she's trying to make a nice space for herself. And then the nice couch with the green throw that again kind of ties in visually with the green of the plant here. And so there are these clues that we can pick up along the way that help us to analyze the significance of the importance of the mise en scène, to helping to communicate information about the narrative. Now here we can see again that the lighting that is used in scenes that are supposed to be sort of natural are more professional than the scenes that are supposed to be Kodak's talking directly to her webcam. There's a conscientious choice that's made to sort of trick us into thinking that the parts that are filmed by multiple cameras with 3-point lighting are real life, like we're flies on the wall, whereas this is where Kodak is directly, intentionally deciding to talk to us. She's not a professional photographer. She's not a professional cinematographer. Therefore, the lighting is poor. The framing is close. Also, you can note here that they've noted that the curtains are different and the framing is really tight to hide the fact that we're in a totally different bedroom. So there are tricks. There are always tricks that you can do by trying to either accentuate or crop out the mise en scène, the decor, the setting, in order to present what seems to be a realistic narrative to your viewers, even when you're dealing with different settings, different locations, financial concerns, things that you would prefer to have a lot of money for, but yet just don't. And also, again, I want to stress that the lighting here, we don't have a very bright key light. Obviously, there's not a fill light. There is not backlight. The background, the curtains look like they're right behind her, even though we know that there's literally a bed between her and the curtains. And so there must be several feet, but because there's not a backlight and because the lighting is so low, this appears to be a very confining space and also a very sort of natural amateur video that would be produced logically by somebody who is filming herself on a webcam. All right, so now I want to talk about space. This is the next component of mise en scène. And there's a difference between shallow space and deep space, and I want us to really pay attention to shallow space and deep space is very different from shallow focus and deep focus. Here we have shallow space. Love this picture of Blades with his mighty meat sausage. But it's shallow space because there's only one level of space. We have simply the table and the close-up of Blades. There's only the foreground. That is it. Compare that to this shot here where we have Zabu and Codex in the foreground. Here in the midground, we have cars and a wall. And then in the background, we have this building and even this telephone that is very far back. So we have three levels of space here. The foreground, the midground, the background. Whereas here we have only the foreground. Now, here we have two shots that show shallow focus versus deep focus. Both of these shots have a foreground, a midground, and a background. Here we have foreground, midground, and background. But this shot has shallow focus, where Codex and Zabu are in focus, and what's here in the background, you can see crisp, clean images of them here in the foreground, but what's in the background is very blurry. You can't make out what's in these pictures, or, you know, that's just like a blurry blob where the plant is. But here, if you look, again, we have a foreground, a midground, and a background, but the papers that are lying there on the table are just as clearly, crisply in focus as the water glasses, and just as clearly, crisply in focus as is Codex and Zabu, and just as crisply, clearly in focus as is this plant in the background. So this is deep focus, where everything is equally in focus, whereas this is shallow focus. Cinematographers make this choice in order to draw our attention to certain aspects within the scene or the shot. Here, we're clearly supposed to be focusing on the intense conversation between Codex and Zabu, whereas over here, apparently we're supposed to be registering the fact that not only are they having a conversation, but that they're having this conversation in this cheesy, cheap restaurant that has fake plants in the background, that has a really bad vinyl covered seat booth here, and also that is, like, again, the water, which shows that they're trying to keep down their expenses. All these people are unemployed, and that they're working, that they're thinking about their virtual lives as they're here in this restaurant with these menus. So, last thing I want to talk about is framing with frontality versus oblique and off-screen space. Now, I am running out of time on this video, so I think I'm going to go ahead and just stop now so that I'm not rushing through it. So stay tuned for the last and final video.